I remember the desert like it was breathing around me. The sand shimmered under a pale, indifferent moon, and a low wind whispered secrets I couldn't understand. I was driving along an empty highway, headlights cutting through fog that had rolled in from nowhere, pressing against the asphalt like a damp, cold hand. Every mile stretched the silence tighter, until even the hum of the engine felt foreign. Somewhere between the shifting dunes and horizon, I saw a light, small, hovering, impossibly still, as if the night itself had shaped it. It pulsed faintly, a rhythm that seemed to sync with my own heartbeat. I stopped, not knowing why. The car suddenly louder than the world around me. My skin prickled, and for a moment, the desert felt less like sand and more like a vast, waiting chamber. I thought I was alone, but the light seemed aware of me. It drifted closer, silent and deliberate, and then as I blinked, the shapes around it, tall, pale, impossible, shifted with an elegance that made my chest tighten. I wanted to look away, but my eyes were glued to them, to the way the shadows stretched and whispered against the dunes. I took a step back, and the ground beneath me seemed to hum. That's when I saw it. Another shape, moving impossibly fast, just beyond the corner of my vision, and I realized the desert had never been empty at all. The desert stretches endlessly. Night drapes over everything like a soft blanket. The hum of tires on asphalt fills the car, steady, unbroken. I'm alone. Only the wind whispers against the glass, carrying something restless. Somewhere far off, the dunes rise and fall, pale shapes in moonlight. And then a flicker. A faint light hovers in the distance. It pulses, slowly like a heartbeat. At first, I think it's a reflection. Another car, a distant motel sign. But it doesn't move. It doesn't shrink. It doesn't fade. The highway stretches straight, flat. Yet the light hovers over sand, alive. Shadows twist near it, shapes that lean and sway. Figures, maybe, but when I blink, they vanish. I slow the car more out of habit than caution. The light responds, or so it feels, pulsing deeper, warmer, insistent. The air inside the vehicle tastes electric. I breathe, taste in the back of my throat. The road smells of asphalt and dry earth. Outside, the wind carries a scent of dust, sharp and cold. Something hums beneath the light, soft at first, then stronger, resonant in my chest. A vibration I can feel before I hear. I glance at the mirrors. Nothing but darkness behind me. No other headlights. No movement. Just the endless stretch. The dunes climb higher near the light. Shadows coil along their curves. I see glimpses, maybe faces. Pale, fleeting. They don't move like humans, yet they seem alive. I tell myself it's a trick of the desert. Heat, wind, isolation. Rational thoughts cling, but they feel distant, like whispers from someone else. My hand taps the steering wheel, softly. The pulses of light sync with it. Each beat grows warmer, more insistent. I feel it in my chest, a slow thrum matching the desert's silent rhythm. The air smells metallic now, faint like rain on iron. The dunes shimmer faintly, light reflecting in ways that shouldn't exist. I blink. Shadows fold into themselves. A figure appears, just for a second, then melts back into sand. I lower the window. A chill rushes in, dry and electric. Whispers skim past my ears, soft, almost teasing. I strain to hear, but the words dissolve before they reach me. The light pulses again, slower this time. I can't tell if it's inviting me or warning me. Every instinct tells me to turn away, but curiosity pins me to the wheel. I drive closer. The hum deepens, vibrating through my seat. Shadows stretch along the dunes, tall and thin, swaying with some rhythm I can't name. They vanish when I glance away, leaving only empty sand. The temperature drops. I can see my breath inside the car. The wind's whispers grow sharper, as if speaking just to me. Something shifts in the corner of my vision. Movement without form, a presence that leans close, just beyond comprehension. The light, it's almost beautiful. Not warm like fire, but alive, conscious. It pulses slowly, dragging me forward. I feel a pull in my chest, a quiet insistence. The dunes curve in unnatural ways as I near. I catch another figure, or two, leaning, reaching, suspended in the air. They dissolve when I blink, leaving ripples in the sand, ripples that shimmer under the light's soft glow. I stop the car. The engine hum dies, leaving only the desert static whisper. The light hovers above the sand, perfectly still now. The shadows around it flicker, vanish, return. I am utterly alone, and yet watched. A breeze passes through the open window. It tastes of iron and silence. The pulsing light slows, fading to almost nothing. I can feel its heartbeat in my own chest. Soft, insistent, impossible to ignore. I close my eyes for a moment. When I open them, the light lingers, distant again. But the feeling remains, curious, electric, alive. The desert swallows the hum. The highway stretches on. I drive forward, alone, and the memory of the first light stays with me, hovering just at the edge of my vision, pulsing like a heartbeat. The sun had already fallen behind the dunes. The desert stretched, empty and endless, like a frozen sea of sand. Each step sank softly, almost liquid, into the warm granules beneath me. The outpost rose ahead, half buried, its walls rusted and hollow. A low hum thrummed under the sand, steady and metallic. I stopped. It wasn't wind. It wasn't my own heartbeat. I walked again, the sand shifting around my ankles, and then a footprint beside mine. I spun, but there was no one, just a soft ripple of sand. The air smelled faintly of iron. The sun had gone, leaving a pale wash across the sky. Stars, or something like them, flickered above. They weren't fixed. They trembled, rearranging slowly, quietly, in patterns I didn't recognize. I moved closer to the outpost. A door hung on one hinge, creaking softly. Inside, shadows pooled. Shapes, or maybe people, shimmered at the edge of vision. Every time I blinked, they dissolved into the dust. The hum grew louder beneath my feet. It pulsed in rhythm with the faint breeze, vibrating through my legs. I wanted to sit, to breathe, to steady myself. But something pressed at the corner of my mind. Watching, waiting, I stepped around a broken wall. A figure flickered near the far doorway, pale, blurred, unformed. I held my breath. It vanished when I blinked. Sand slipped through my fingers. I could hear it whisper, like faint static murmurs. The footprints followed me still, forming and fading in tandem with my own. Every step, a twin that didn't belong. The sky pulsed again. A pale light, uneven, washed across the dunes. Stars slid imperceptibly, leaving traces of themselves behind. The desert was alive, or pretending to be. I crouched near a crumbled wall. The hum dipped, hollow and expectant. I pressed my hands into sand. It shifted beneath them, pliable and unwilling. The air smelled of dust and something metallic, sweet and raw. Shapes drifted just beyond my vision, always at the edge. They moved with the tide of sand. Silent, patient. I didn't want to turn and look, but I couldn't stop. The footprints vanished. Or maybe I had stopped seeing them. A breeze carried a faint scraping, like soft claws against stone. My own heartbeat echoed it, unsteady. The outpost doorway yawned before me. Inside, darkness swallowed edges. And beneath it all, the hum persisted. Steady, mechanical, familiar, as if it had always been waiting beneath the desert. I wanted to step back, to run, but the sand held me lightly, insistently. I felt its weight in my chest, in my lungs. The shapes lingered. The stars above kept sliding. And I realized alone was a choice I had never really made. A shadow brushed past my shoulder. Cold, whispering, near. I didn't turn. I didn't breathe too loudly. I simply let the desert move me forward. The hum sank deeper. The pale light folded in on itself. And for a long moment, everything was still. Even the sand seemed to pause. Waiting, watching. Then it shifted again. I moved, and the desert moved with me. The horizon trembled, though nothing moved. A shimmer stretched across the dunes, like a broken television left on too long. Static danced across the air, pale and flickering. The wind had been soft, brushing my skin with sand. And then it stopped. Everything stopped. Moonlight slid across the desert, thin and silver. And there, beyond the last ridge, a shape hung in the air. It was a craft, I think, though it had no engine, no sound, just a metallic gleam, shifting as though it breathed with the moon. I tried to blink it away. It didn't disappear. The light fractured, reflections scattering like fractured glass across the dunes. My boots sank into the cold sand. The air smelled faintly of ozone and something older, rusting, like metal left to rot under the sun. I wanted to speak. Nothing came. Not a whisper. Not a breath. And then I noticed it. A figure, pale and thin, emerging from the curve of a dune. It didn't walk. It moved in slices, a glide between frames like a film skipping. I thought it might vanish if I didn't look, but its gaze, or whatever it had, caught me, frozen, staring. Eyes, I think, though they were not human. The sand shifted under me. Each grain whispered against my palms as I crouched, trying to remain unseen. The horizon static shimmered again. The craft reflected it, a ripple of silver across the dark. I felt my pulse, but it was quieter than the silence. A hum, soft, vibrating through my teeth. And the figure, it mirrored my movements. Not exactly. It lagged, twisted in ways my mind refused to understand. I tried to breathe normally. The air tasted sharp, metallic, like fear distilled into something you could swallow. My hands left faint impressions in the sand, and I could not look away. A shadow shifted behind the figure. Another, or a trick of the moon. It hovered close to the craft. Silent, patient, watching. I thought of running, but my feet were heavy. The sand clung to them like it knew I could not escape. I felt the cold slide of metal in my chest, though nothing touched me. Then the static thickened, like fog rolling in, swallowing the horizon. The craft pulsed once, and the figure, pale as moonlight on old bones, tilted its head, as if listening, or deciding. I wanted the world to sound again. A wind, a whisper, a snap of twig. But the silence held me, tight, and the static hummed louder in my ears. Something shifted in the figure's shape. Not movement, not like walking. It blurred, multiplied, stretching along the dune in a way that made me stumble. My knees sank into the sand. I could feel each grain scratch my palms, each one pressing into memory. The craft reflection fractured across the dunes, and for a heartbeat, I thought it might descend, or fold itself into the night, swallowing everything in silver. The figure paused, still impossible, still wrong. It did not move closer. It did not retreat. It simply was. I dared to look down at my hands. The sand had begun to shift again, but softly, like breathing. The hum softened. A faint wind lifted my hair. And then it was gone. The figure vanished. The horizon shimmered like normal desert. The craft gone. I was alone. Sand slipped between my fingers. The wind whispered faintly, almost comforting. But in the back of my skull, the memory of impossible movement, of metallic reflections, lingered. I walked slowly back to where I had left my trail. Footprints erased themselves behind me, as if nothing had been there. The sky stretched empty. No static, no hovering craft. Only the echo of a hum. Only the memory of a gaze that did not belong to this world. I shivered, and the desert waited, silent. The sand swallowed my tracks. I glanced behind me, expecting the deep grooves of my tires. Nothing, just smooth, pale ridges untouched, as though the desert itself rejected my passage. The air was still, but a faint hum lingered beneath the silence. Not wind, something lower, resonating through my chest, vibrating under my skin. I stepped forward. Faint marks appeared on the dunes, a soft glow against the gray-gold sand. They weren't footprints. Lines thin and curling, etched like veins across the earth. The light pulsed, gentle and alive, leading me toward a depression in the dunes. It was shallow, a hollow dug by wind or by something else. The glow pooled there, brighter, almost liquid, as though the sand collected the light itself. I crouched at the edge, feeling the grain slip through my fingers. Cold, not the warmth of the desert floor, but a chill that clung to skin. I inhaled. The air smelled metallic, like rust and wet stone. Shapes shifted on the horizon, tall, thin, stretching farther than any human form could. They twisted, bending unnaturally, like smoke caught in wind that doesn't exist. I tried to blink them away, but the hum intensified. Low, endless. It made the hair on my arm stand rigid, my teeth ache with vibration. My eyes traced the glowing lines again. They weren't random, curving, flowing, leading me, whispering me toward the hollow. I stepped into the depression. The glow wrapped around my ankles, soft light licking upward. The air thrummed with each heartbeat. Each pulse of the hum matched mine, or mine matched it. I couldn't tell. A shadow flickered near the edge of my vision. Too fast to be a dune. Too deliberate to be wind. I froze, breath shallow. The shapes moved closer, still distant, yet somehow filling my peripheral sight. Their limbs elongated, bending against themselves. They weren't running, but I knew they were aware of me. I felt watched, naked against the desert's vast emptiness. I knelt, tracing the glowing lines with my fingers. The sand was sticky, almost liquid in the faint light. It left marks, yet I knew they would vanish soon. Already, the traces of my passage were being erased, rewritten by something unseen. A gust of wind stirred the edges of the hollow. Not cold, not warm, just present, carrying the taste of dust and something sharp, coppery, that lingered in the back of my throat. I didn't move. I could only watch as the glow pulsed, rising slightly, like breathing. Shapes in the distance swayed, in rhythm, synchronized with the hum. A dread that was too large to name pressed into my chest. And yet, wonder tugged behind it, impossible to separate. I wanted to look away, but my eyes kept tracing the lines, following the lights pulled deeper into the hollow. It felt patient, ancient, waiting. The hum softened, a vibration under my feet now, not in my ears. I stepped forward, careful. The glow gathered, as if drawn to me. Each step the sand trembled slightly, a subtle ripple that vanished the moment I looked back. Behind me, no tracks remained, only the smooth desert, only silence, and the whisper of tall, thin shapes bending far beyond the horizon that I sank onto my knees. The hollow cradled me in light and vibration. My hands were coated in sand, warm and cold all at once. I wanted to rise, to run, to flee, but the desert held me still. The shapes tilted, a faint shimmer in the distance, stretching impossibly tall. The hum flattened into a constant thrum, and the glow, it pulsed once more, brighter than before softening, fading. I didn't leave. I couldn't. And yet, the desert seemed to have left me here, alone, tracks erased, presence ignored, lingering in a hum that would follow me long after the dunes returned to silence. The sun hung low over the desert, burning the sand to a pale, blinding white. Each step sank deep, swallowing my feet, leaving only heat and grain behind. I thought I saw something far ahead, a city, or maybe just a structure, but it shimmered, wavering, impossible in the haze. The heat made the edges ripple, bending like water. I walked toward it, slower now, unsure. The air tasted thick, dry on my tongue, clinging to the back of my throat. The horizon shimmered again, and I realized the city had grown sharper, taller, more detailed. Windows caught sunlight that shouldn't exist. Streets twisted at angles that made no sense. A sudden shadow at the corner of my eye. I turned, but there was nothing, just the sand, empty, then movement. Pale figures glimmering briefly at the edges of my vision. One raised a hand. Or maybe it was a warning, a beckon. I couldn't tell. The closer I stepped, the farther the city seemed to drift away, like water slipping through my fingers. I quickened my pace, but the mirage dissolved before I reached it. The heat stretched, distorted, leaving only the empty, silent desert. The sand no longer burned my feet. A chill settled in, sharp and sudden. My breath hung in the air, a thin, smoky ribbon I could see twisting and fading. The wind whispered low across the dunes, carrying a faint rustling that wasn't mine. Another flicker at the edge of my vision. A figure, maybe two, pale and blurred, like they weren't fully there. They hovered near a dune, just beyond reach. Their forms melted when I blinked, leaving me alone. I stumbled, uncertain which way I'd been heading. The desert no longer stretched in familiar lines. Everything seemed folded in on itself. Shadows grew longer, but but the sun still scorched from above. I could feel the cold bite along my arms, crawling beneath my shirt. The mirage wanted something. Or maybe it was trying to warn me. I couldn't hear a voice, but the silence pressed against my ears. It left me hollow, alert, and trembling. I reached a ridge and looked back. Nothing but sand. No city, no figures. Only the sharp wind carrying my own heartbeat back at me. And yet, when I blinked, I thought I saw movement again. Faint outlines, bending, shifting, hovering just beyond where the eye could rest. I dared not turn fully. Each step forward was slower than the last. Every breath clouded the air and sank into the dunes. The desert held me in its emptiness. The mirage was gone. The pale figures were gone. But I could still feel them at the edges of my vision, watching, waiting. I stopped. The sand was silent. The wind softened. I waited, too, hoping it would end, hoping it was safe to move. But deep inside, I knew the desert never truly let you go. The sand shifted beneath my feet. A hum, low and steady, pressed against my chest. It pulsed in rhythm with my heartbeat. The horizon stretched pale and empty. Shadows flickered along the dunes, but not like they belonged to anything real. They twisted long and wrong, curling over the ridges in ways the light shouldn't allow. A breeze brushed my face, cold, almost alive. I thought I caught a whisper in it, a name maybe, or just fragments of words that dissolved before I could grasp them. I stopped walking. The hum grew sharper. It vibrated through my shoes, through my bones, like the earth itself had started to breathe. The shadows moved closer. I didn't see them approach, but I felt the pressure of something sliding just behind me. Eyes? Perhaps. Or just the shape of air disturbed by presence. I took a careful step. The sand sang underfoot, soft, metallic, impossible. Each grain seemed aware, each vibration tracing along my skin. A breeze swirled again, colder this time. It carried words I almost understood. A warning, maybe, or a memory not my own. I shivered, wrapping my arms around myself. But the warmth didn't come. Shadows twisted upward now, climbing over the curves of the dunes like they wanted to topple into me. I wanted to run. My legs wouldn't obey. The hum settled into a single tone, ringing inside my skull. It made my teeth chatter softly, made my fingers tingle, made the air taste like iron. I realized I was not alone. Not physically, not in sight, but in the space I occupied. Something circled me, slipping between waves of heat and cold, bending the air with its presence. I whispered to myself, soft, meaningless words, to anchor to something familiar. The sand hummed back. It echoed my fear. A shadow leaned closer, elongated and cruel. The edges of it flickered, like candlelight on water. I blinked, and it was gone. But the cold lingered, wrapping my ankles, my wrists, my neck. The horizon blurred in pale light. The wind carried more whispers, half-formed syllables like they were tasting me. I wanted to move, to step off the dunes, to escape whatever was circling. But the sand hummed louder now. It sang through the soles of my feet. It pressed against my chest with a rhythm I could not resist. I felt my pulse join it, my body answering an unseen call. Time slipped. The sky faded into the same gray as the sand. The shadows stretched endlessly, and the presence never left. It was patient. I realized I could not leave. I sank to the sand, letting it hum around me, letting it trace the outline of my fear. The breeze brushed again, soft, insistent, cold. I almost understood what it whispered, but the words vanished. The hum softened, and the shadows waited. I stayed still, watching, listening, feeling the dunes breathe, and in the quiet, I realized I was alone, and not alone at all. The desert stretched endlessly. Cold wind carried grit across my skin. The moon hung low, pale and quiet. I thought I saw movement, a pair of silver eyes glinting behind a dune. They blinked, together. A pause. Then nothing. The night fell hollow. No insects, no rustling. Even the wind seemed to wait. I shifted, trying to calm myself. But the eyes were closer now, peering from the crest of another dune. Blink. Gone. Heart hammering. The sand whispered beneath my boots. Each step sounded loud, too too real. I crouched, breath shallow. The air smelled metallic, like iron and water. Silver eyes again. They didn't move, but they watched. They waited. I turned slowly. They were behind me, too. Every blink erased them, then returned them nearer each time. The desert stretched endlessly, and I was alone. I crouched lower, fingers brushing cold sand. It felt sharp, electric. A hum rose from nowhere, or maybe from me, a vibration under my skin. The moonlight shimmered across the dunes, a pale glow reflected in tiny, shifting shapes. I blinked. Gone. Silence returned, so heavy it pressed against my chest. I could hear my pulse. I whispered my own name. The words barely moved air. The eyes didn't respond. They never looked away, always just beyond reach, and yet always present. I stepped back. Sand fell through my fingers, cold and soft and real. Blink. Closer. The dunes seemed taller now. Shadows stretched unnaturally. I felt watched from every side, all angles, always. A single gust of wind lifted sand in slow, curling spirals. I inhaled it, grinned my throat. The smell of ozone hung faintly, sharp. I froze, and then I realized the eyes weren't blinking. I was. A subtle shift in the air. The dunes breathed in rhythm with my own heartbeat. I could almost feel something stirring beneath them. The eyes appeared once more. Silver, pale, hollow, staring, waiting. I wanted to run, but my legs refused. The desert had me. Blink. They vanished again. Only silence remained. A silence that pressed into my ears, into my bones. I breathed. A single, shivering breath. The wind returned, faint and distant, carrying sand across the dunes. I took one more step, then another. The desert shifted beneath me, and the silver eyes were gone. For now, the dunes were silent. Thick fog had crept in overnight, curling around each mound, hiding the horizon. I could barely see my own hands in front of me. The sand pressed cold beneath my boots, wet with dew. Every step felt heavier, as if the earth itself resisted me. A chill wrapped around my neck, tugging, whispering. Then it began. Soft footsteps far behind me. Slow, steady, shifting, but no marks in sand. I stopped. My breath rose and missed, a small cloud that dissolved instantly. The sound didn't. It lingered, closed now, though I dared not turn. Moonlight flickered across the dunes. Shapes that should not exist winked in and out of view. A ridge would twist, a valley would bend, impossibly, unnaturally. The fog swallowed it all, yet the figure moved within, pale, just beyond sight. I felt its gaze without seeing it, a presence that brushed the hairs on my arms, a whisper in the static of fog. I tried to walk faster. Sand swallowed my feet, every step sinking into silence. The footsteps matched me, slow, deliberate, never leaving a trace. The wind shifted, a sharp metallic scent. Rust, maybe blood, maybe memory. I shivered. My pulse thumped louder than the quiet around me. Then nothing, just the dunes and the figure. I dared a glance. White against white, pale against pale, it glided across the folds of sand. Not walking, not floating, moving in a way that hurt my eyes to follow. I blinked. The shape was gone. The fog thickened, pressing against my chest. Every inhale tasted of damp, of emptiness. A whisper caught on the edge of my hearing, too soft to name. I thought it was my own name. Then it was another voice. A chorus, almost, but fractured. I stumbled. Sand slipping beneath me, my hands scraping wet grains. The footprints behind me, still none. And yet the feeling of being pursued did not fade. It coiled around my ankles, slipped under my ribs, tugged at my throat. I froze. The moonlight fractured again, casting the dunes into impossible geometry. Hollows within hollows, shadows bending where they should not. And there, just for a heartbeat, the figure appeared closer. I could see nothing but its shape, pale, silent, watching. My legs moved before my mind could catch up. Sand rose behind me, soft clouds of white, erasing itself as if it had never been disturbed. I ran blind, the fog swallowing every sound I made, yet the footsteps followed, closer than my own. Every dune looked the same. Every hollow was deeper than before. Then, suddenly, the silence. The fog thickened into a wall, cold and solid. I stopped, my chest heaving, and the figure vanished. Only the dunes remained. Moonlight flickered once, then steadied. I sank to the sand, tasting on my lips, damp and grainy. No footprints, no sound, just the fog, and the memory of steps that should not exist. I did not move for a long time. The night stretched on, stretching me with it. Every breath a whisper, every heartbeat a warning. The dunes waited, and I knew they always would. The desert was quiet, not empty exactly, but listening. The sand stretched pale and endless beneath a sky half dimmed by fading sun. Each step sank slightly, and the grains whispered back. I thought I was alone, but then the ground beneath me hummed. A pulse, faint at first, like the rhythm of my own heartbeat. It grew subtle, steady, deliberate. Shadows bent across the dunes, not like shadows should. They leaned, stretched, and reached in ways my eyes could not follow. A light appeared, not high in the sky, not the sun or moon, but hovering just above the surface of sand. It drifted, moving with purpose, as if the desert itself was breathing it into existence. I held my breath. The air felt thick, almost viscous, against my skin. Each inhalation tasted dry dust and something older than the wind. The vibration in the sand became a pulse I could almost see. It rippled outward, circling my feet, threading through the dunes, and with each wave, the light moved again, waiting, watching. I wanted to run. My legs trembled, but the sand seemed to hold me, soft, shifting, refusing. The shadows bent closer. A dune became a figure, then just a hint of one, then nothing at all. I blinked. The light had drifted further, but it felt aware. Every movement I made echoed in hush, as if the desert measured my pulse against its own. The wind rose, not a gust, just a slow, breathing sigh. It carried the scent of scorched stone and something sweet beneath, like decay that had learned patience. I knelt in the sand. The vibration was stronger now, pulsing through my knees, my palms, my chest. I felt it in my teeth, in my hair, as if the desert were a living organism, and I was a part of its quiet rhythm. The light hovered closer, not threatening, but attentive. I could sense intelligence in its motion. Curiosity mirrored my own. I closed my eyes. The pulse continued, and in that silence, I felt the desert breathe around me. Each exhale a story, each shadow a question. When I opened them again, the light had paused, floating above a dune crest. Its glow was softer now, like it was listening to the soft drum of my heartbeat, matching it, almost comforting, almost safe. But the sand beneath me quivered again, tiny tremors that hinted at something vast, something patient, watching. I stayed there, alone, but not alone. The desert pulsed with me, and I with it, a rhythm I could neither escape nor understand. Eventually, the light drifted away, slow, deliberate, and the vibration ebbed with it. The dunes became still. The shadows fell into their normal angles, but memory of their bending lingered on my skin. I walked forward, leaving faint footprints behind. The desert did not follow. Not yet, but I could still feel it. Under my feet, around my chest, inside my pulse. The desert remembered me, and I remembered its pulse. The night was colder than I expected. Moonlight draped itself over the clearing, pale and quiet. The wind trembled through the trees, soft, restless. I stepped forward, and the ground fell away into a shallow crater. It glowed faintly, almost like the moon had pressed itself into the earth. I bent closer. Fragments of metal lay scattered around, thin, jagged, humming with warmth. My fingers brushed one. It was hotter than it looked, almost alive. A whisper floated past. I froze. It wasn't English, not any language I'd ever heard. Soft, thread-like, just beyond understanding. Shapes hovered at the crater's edges. Shadows, I thought at first, but they moved too deliberately, in and out, like dancers behind sheer curtains. I held my breath. The wind shifted. A metallic tang filled my nose. A hum tickled my ears. I wanted to call out. but my voice wouldn't form. The whispers wrapped around me instead, grazing my skin, curling in my chest. I reached for another fragment. It pulsed under my fingers, almost breathing. A faint warmth spread up my arm, oddly comforting, though the shape still lurked. The trees sighed, branches scraped the sky. I realized my own heart was loud in comparison. The crater's glow deepened, shifting, like it responded to my presence. Something slid across the far edge, slower than a person, faster than a shadow. It paused, then retreated into the dark. I wanted to leave, my feet pressed into the damp earth, but I couldn't move. The whisper seemed to lean closer, curling around my ears like smoke. I knelt, brushed more fragments into my palm. Each one hummed differently, different pitches, different warmth, like a language spoken without words. A flicker of movement caught my eye, at the very edge of the crater, a shape pale against the darker soil. It paused as if studying me, then vanished. The wind shifted again, a soft rustling of leaves, then silence, like the night held its breath. I stepped back, finally, though my hand still clutched the fragments. The whispers faded to nothing. Only the hum of the metal remained, soft against my skin. The crater's glow dimmed, retreating into the soil. The shadows lingered at the edges, in and out of sight, never leaving, never revealing. I touched the fragments one last time. Cold now, almost empty. The warmth gone, like it had never been there at all. I turned toward the path home. The forest waited quietly. The wind carried no words. But I could still feel it, watching, whispering, just beyond understanding. I left the clearing. The pale landing remained, silent, waiting. The dunes lay pale beneath a cold, silver moon. The wind whispered across the sand, carrying a smell of dry stone. My feet sank quietly, leaving tracks that seemed to vanish before my eyes. Above me, a light hovered. Not the moon, not a star, something else. It moved softly, as if aware I was watching. Shadows twisted in impossible ways, stretching across the sand like long fingers. I reached for it. It drifted upward deliberately, teasing, slow. The heat of my hand meant nothing. Only air, only the faint hum that I thought came from inside my own chest. The dunes stretched ahead, taller than before, sharper. Each step sounded louder, echoing across the emptiness. I stopped. The light paused too. We were watching each other. The wind shifted. A smell of metal and wet sand filled the air, thick and sudden. I moved closer. The sand beneath my fingers was warm, though the night air chilled my arms. The orb pulsed once, small and bright, then twice. It cast a shadow that moved against reason, against every law I knew. I wanted to step back, but my feet stayed rooted. Curiosity held me. Unease settled deeper. I whispered my own name, but it was swallowed by the vast quiet. The dunes bent strangely, folding into themselves impossible angles in the pale light. The air tasted faintly of smoke, though nothing burned. My pulse thudded, a drum beneath the hush of the night. I lifted my hand again. It drifted just out of reach, circling, hovering, watching. The light was soft, yet it burned my eyes with the insistence of knowing. I felt its gaze like cold fingers on my shoulder. Behind me, the sand seemed to ripple, though no wind touched it. I spun. Nothing. Only shadows that should not have been, stretching toward me from every direction. The orb moved closer now, and yet it remained distant, always a breath away. I tried to speak. The words tangled in my throat, thick as the fog curling across the dunes. I could smell something faintly sweet, almost like old flowers, drifting in the cold night. The light pulsed again, a slow, steady rhythm, like a heartbeat in the sky. I walked cautiously toward it. Each step drew the dunes longer, more unnatural, folding into shapes I could not name. The sand felt alive beneath my fingers. And still, it hovered, waiting, circling, pulling me forward. I stopped at the edge of a small rise. The orb lowered, softly, almost shyly. Its glow touched the sand, and for a moment, the shadows were gone. Then, as I leaned closer, they returned, warped, cruel, impossible. My breath caught. It was mine and not mine, a whisper of another presence brushing my skin. The dunes fell silent. Only the hum remained, and the orb, motionless now, hanging in the air, a light without source. I reached again, and it drifted once more, slow, deliberate. I knew I could never touch it. I could only follow, endlessly, through the dunes that bent and stretched around me. And still I did. The dunes were silent tonight. A low wind moved across them, cold and patient, brushing over the grains like a whisper through dry bones. I had walked this path before, but never felt so utterly seen. The air carried something sharp, a faint metallic taste, like the tang of old blood caught in my throat. It clung to every breath, coating my tongue as I exhaled into the stillness. The horizon shimmered, not from heat, but from a thin, wavering haze that seemed to breathe. Every few steps, the sand shifted behind me, soft, deliberate, like footsteps, too close to be wind, too measured to be chance. When I turned, nothing, only the moon staring back, pale and tired, reflecting off a sea of gold and silver dust. And yet, the sand was marked, a single print beside mine, pressed deep, fresh. I froze. My chest barely moved, afraid the next breath might summon whatever had made it. The silence was so complete, it began to hum, a low, trembling vibration that sank into the skin of my arms, like static beneath the surface of my thoughts. I whispered into the emptiness, though I didn't mean to, "Who's there?" No reply, only the slow exhale of the dunes, settling again. I kept walking. Every few steps, the air thickened, metallic and warm. The smell came stronger now, rust and rain, though there hadn't been clouds for weeks. I brushed my sleeve against my face, but the scent stayed, lingering behind my eyes. When I looked down again, the footprints multiplied. One beside me, then another half a stride ahead, then one behind. They appeared and vanished in strange rhythm, as if something moved around me, circling in and out of being. Every time I blinked, the arrangement changed. Each blink felt longer, heavier. I told myself it was tricks of light, shifting sands, wind carving illusions. But the hum, that low, static breath, was growing, not in the air, but inside my skull. It pulsed softly in time with my heartbeat. Every throb painted faint sparks behind my eyes, white and blue, like distant lightning through fog. I didn't remember stopping. Yet there I was, standing still, knees shaking, watching the faint outline of my own shadow melt into another, not darker, just there. It leaned slightly forward, matching my every breath, though I wasn't breathing at all. I tried to speak, a word, a plea, something, but my throat closed around the air. The metallic taste thickened. I could hear the sand moving now, tiny grains tumbling in small circles near my feet, stirred by a presence I couldn't see, like a hand tracing patterns I didn't understand. The hum shifted, deeper, warmer, a resonance that filled a hollow in my chest. It was no longer outside me. It was with me. I started walking again, faster this time, my hands trembling, brushing against the coarse fabric of my coat. Every movement left static trails, faint, crackling touches that danced across my fingertips. Behind me, the dunes whispered, footsteps again, sometimes near, sometimes impossibly far. I didn't look back. Somewhere between breaths, I realized I wasn't alone in the rhythm of walking. Each step I took landed in sync with another, a perfect echo, slightly delayed, like my shadow learning to move. The air thickened again. I felt it press gently at my shoulders, the way someone might stand behind you in a crowd, not touching, but close enough to feel their warmth. And then a whisper. It wasn't a word, just a faint inhale shared with mine, an invisible breath drawn from the same space. I turned. Nothing, just a long stretch of dunes under a tired moon. But in the sand, the prints. 2 sets now, side by side. The hum quieted for a moment. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was listening. My heart pounded, echoing like steps on hollow wood. I wanted to run, but the stillness begged me not to. I felt that if I moved too fast, I'd lose something, or would lose me. The dunes trembled softly, not from wind, from something moving just beneath the surface. The metallic scent grew heavy again, like the world itself was bleeding quietly. And I knew whatever had followed me was closer now, not behind, not beside. With the hum rose once more, soft as breath against my ear. I felt a warmth trace the edge of my neck, like a hand, almost gentle. The sand at my feet shifted, a circle forming, delicate, careful. Then nothing. The static faded. The air thinned. The dunes fell still again. Only my footprints remained, and one more pressed aside them. Not moving, not gone, just waiting. The desert stretched endlessly beneath a pale, slanting sun. Wind whispered across the dunes, carrying a chill I didn't expect in the heat. Each grain of sand shimmered faintly, restless, alive. I paused, feeling the air hum. A faint, distant note rose from the dunes, barely there, almost imagined. It swelled slowly, layered, as if the wind itself were singing. Shadows shifted around me. They rippled like water, moving without cause, brushing the edge of my vision. I told myself it was just the light, just the sand, but my chest tightened. The melody grew, soft harmonics, hovering just beneath hearing, threading into the quiet. Each tone felt familiar, as though I had dreamed it once, long ago. It made my skin tingle, and yet it carried a weight I couldn't place. I stepped forward, sand crunching underfoot. The figures in the shadows coalesced. Humanoid, but wrong. Too fluid, too tall, their edges blurring into the wind. They shifted, harmonizing, moving like slow waves in a tide I couldn't escape. I wanted to run, but my feet stayed rooted, sand gripping my ankles. My heart synced with the rhythm of the sound. The notes rose and fell, swelled and softened, pulling me deeper into their quiet choir. I thought of speaking, calling out, but my voice was swallowed before it left my lips. All around me, the dunes whispered back, a chorus of echoes in a language I almost understood. Shadows brushed my shoulder. A cold draft, though the sun still burned above. I shivered. For a moment, I thought one of the figures had touched me. I looked, nothing but moving shade, dissolving as I blinked. The music bent, a single high note that shivered across my skull. I saw the silhouettes clearly then, tall and wavering, stretching across the sand. I could feel their gaze, not eyes, not faces, just awareness. It pressed against my chest, a soft weight, gentle and insistent. I wanted to turn away. I wanted to leave the sand, the wind, the song. But the chorus held me. I realized then that awe and dread were indistinguishable here, blending like sand and shadow. The wind whispered something else, a low undertone beneath the choir, faint and tremulous. It wrapped around my ankles, my fingers, my hair. I could smell the dry, sharp scent of the desert in it, and the faint tang of something older, iron, maybe blood, maybe just the earth itself. I dared a breath. It felt like inhaling the song itself, filling me, stretching me thin. And yet, the shadows stayed, ever shifting, never still, never leaving. The desert hummed, a low, almost tender. The choir softened to nothing more than a sigh. The shapes wavered one last time before dissolving into the sand, leaving only ripples behind. I knelt, letting the heat press against my palms, feeling the lingering vibration beneath the grains. I wanted to believe it was over, but the air still held the pulse. A quiet, patient note that hummed just beneath the wind. It waited. I rose slowly, ears straining, heart still caught in the remnants of the song. The dunes lay empty now, pale and endless, but I knew it would not stay silent for long. I walked on, leaving footprints that would vanish by morning. The desert was patient, and it was listening. The desert stretched endlessly beneath a pale moon. The sand was cold, though the air carried a dry heat that clung to my skin. Above me, the sky mirrored every grain, every shadow, as if I had stepped into water. A faint wind whispered over the dunes, rustling the loose sand in soft, irregular patterns. Every footstep I took answered me twice, once under my own weight, once from somewhere just beyond reach. It made my chest tighten, the echo stretching longer than it should, like the desert itself was listening. I thought I saw movement on the horizon, pale figures, blurred at first like smoke or mirage. They didn't shift the sand beneath them, not a single ripple. I slowed, heart trying to match the unnatural stillness around me. The horizon trembled, or maybe I did. A dry, distant hum rose from nowhere and everywhere, vibrating to the soles of my boots. The air smelled faintly of iron and ash, though the desert held no fire. I reached out to touch the nearest dune, and the sand didn't feel solid, like it had been painted on glass. Each grain stuck briefly to my fingertips before falling away, leaving a chill behind. The figures didn't approach, didn't speak, didn't breathe. They simply hovered at the edge of sight, reflected perfectly in the mirrored sky above. I blinked. When I opened my eyes, one had moved closer, though no sand shifted beneath it. My shadow stretched unnaturally long behind me, then split. Two of me crouched in the silver light, watching. The wind carried a soft rustle, a whisper of movement, but no one was near. I tried to call out, my voice swallowed in the double echo of the dunes. It sounded like laughter, but hollow, dry, like bones brushing together in the dark. I swallowed. The taste of dust and metal filled my mouth. Time seemed to fracture. Each second elongated, dragging the figures closer, though the horizon remained the same. I felt my pulse in my ears, louder than the hum beneath my feet. A single figure raised a hand, not toward me, toward the mirrored sky. The stars above bent, reflected down into the sand, and I realized the figures were part of that reflection. They had never been there at all. That I crouched low, fingertips pressed to the glassy sand, trying to anchor myself. The hum grew softer, then stopped, leaving only the echo of my own heartbeat. Every shadow was still, every footstep silent. Though I knew they had doubled before it, a coldness brushed my neck. I spun, half expecting a figure to stand behind me. Nothing, only the desert, the sky, and my double reflection. The figures lingered at the edge of perception, neither moving nor fading. I breathed shallowly, tasting the chill in the air. The desert no longer seemed empty. It seemed patient, watching, waiting, mirrored in every grain beneath the stars. The wind began again, softer this time, dragging the pale light across the dunes like slow water. I stepped backward, careful, sensing the echo of my movements in a place that wasn't quite real. The horizon shimmered. The figures faded, not walking away, but dissolving into the mirrored sky. I stood alone. The desert exhaled around me, a soft, steady silence. The sky held me, the sand held me, but nothing moved. I realized I could leave, but I didn't move. I listened. The echo of the desert whispered only itself, twice, endlessly. The air was thin and cold, but not bitter. The ridge stretched before me, pale under the half-light of a waning moon. Each step pressed into soft soil, quiet, almost reverent. A hum began, low, almost imperceptible at first, brushing the edge of my ears. It wasn't wind, not the river, not anything I had heard before. Shadows pooled beneath the trees, dark tongues reaching across the ground. I thought they were just shapes at first, but they moved. I paused. The hum thickened, vibrating through my chest. I felt it in my fingers and the soles of my boots. The ground beneath me seemed to tremble. The ridge curved upward, and a faint light hung in the center of the clearing, soft white but unnatural, as though it existed outside the night. Shadows surrounded it, forming a ring, too deliberate, too perfect. I crouched behind a gnarled root. The hum pulsed. It was closer now, like a heartbeat, but not human. It made my teeth ache. I saw movement within the ring. Thin figures, blurred at the edges, stepping lightly, almost floating. They shifted as though the air itself obeyed them. I wanted to breathe, but the sound of it seemed loud in my ears. I held still. The wind rustled through the ridge, but it didn't reach them. The light stretched shadows into impossible shapes. I blinked. They were gone, but the hum stayed. I edged closer, careful to press into the hollow of the ground. The ring reformed, slightly altered. One shadow lingered, bending strangely, almost like it was listening. The hum responded, rising and falling with its motion. I imagined reaching out just to see. My hand trembled before I could. The air smelled faintly of metal and moss, wet stone. I felt my pulse in my throat, in my fingertips. The figures shifted again. I thought I saw faces, pale and thin, not quite human. Or maybe I imagined them. The ridge seemed to lean inward, as though the earth itself was curious. The hum grew sharp, a knife under my skin. I wanted to step back, but my feet felt rooted. Something in the rhythm called me. The shadow nearest the light tilted its head. A motion so subtle I almost missed it. I took a single step. The hum softened. The ring pulsed an acknowledgement or warning. I could not tell. A soft breeze carried a whisper, or maybe a memory. It touched my ears, warm and cold at once. I imagined the shadow reaching out, stretching over me like fog. My breath caught. It didn't move closer. It waited. Time blurred. Each second a drumbeat in the hum. The ridge felt wider, narrower, impossible all at once. I wanted to run, but my mind was fixed on the light. Then, as abruptly as it began, the movement stopped. The ring of shadows froze. The light dimmed. Only the hum remained, steady, distant now, as if sighing through the earth. I crouched low, still feeling its pulse soft under my ribs. It was waiting. I didn't know what for. And then, slowly I stepped back. The ridge returned to silence. The pale light faded behind the tree lean. I could still hear it, just at the edge of my hearing. A hum, low, patient. Always there, somewhere beyond the ridge. I walked away, but I knew it would follow, waiting in corners of the night I could not see. Even now, I can feel it beneath my feet. Soft, relentless, a breath of something alive, but not meant for me. The morning fog still clung to the canyon walls, pale and damp against my skin. The air smelled of cold stone and something older, almost like the earth itself was breathing. I had walked this path countless times, but today felt different. A shape appeared ahead, sudden, impossible. A canyon, though I had never seen it before, twisting in ways my mind refused to follow. Its edges bent back on themselves, spiraling where no canyon should. I stopped, my breath caught in my chest. The birds had vanished. Even the wind seemed to hesitate at its mouth. I stepped closer. The ground softened beneath my boots, a subtle pull tugging at my chest, my bones. I wanted to resist, but something deeper whispered forward. The air inside the canyon was empty, not silent, not really, but like the world had swallowed every sound before it reached me. My own heartbeat echoed against the void. Each step fell hollow, each breath like I was moving through water. Shadows twisted along the walls, though the light was pale, mid-morning sun spilling through mist. They moved, not with me, but around me, brushing the edges of my vision. I tilted my head. The rocks above seemed to pulse. A faint hum, almost beneath hearing, pressed against my ribs. I tried to call out. My voice wouldn't leave my throat. It folded back on itself, slipping into the canyon center. The pull grew stronger. I didn't walk. I was drawn. Something brushed my shoulder. Not air, not wind, something that left a chill along my spine. I froze. It was gone. I was alone. The canyon twisted again. My senses felt stretched. Distance and direction meant nothing here. I reached out, fingertips brushing stone that felt like velvet, smooth and impossibly warm. Time began to smear. Moments overlapped. A rustling behind me. I turned, but the canyon bent the horizon, folding the world. No end, no beginning, just movement. A light appeared, faint and tremulous. It didn't illuminate, it invited. I felt drawn again, deeper toward the center. My stomach churned. It wasn't fear. It was recognition of something I shouldn't know. I knelt, felt the cold dust between my fingers. It smelled like metal and rain. And then the pull became unbearable. I could hear nothing, or everything. A single heartbeat? No, mine amplified, hollowed, echoed. Soft footsteps behind me, though I hadn't moved. A whisper, almost felt rather than heard, slid across my skin. I wanted to turn, to run, but the canyon refused. It wrapped around my ankles, tugged my chest forward into the impossible. The center opened beneath a pale light. I felt the force lessen, the hum fade, the world shift subtly. It was waiting. Nothing malicious, but nothing safe. I sat on the edge, toes brushing air. The canyon held me there, patient. I could see the folds of stone, the impossible twists, but I could not trace them. And yet, I understood them in some small, secret way. A bird finally cried somewhere far above. The fog thinned. The pole receded. I stood, took a careful step back. The canyon remained, twisting, silent, waiting. I don't know if it will ever let me leave entirely, or if leaving is just part of its design. The path behind me reappeared. I walked it slowly, boots damp, chest tight. Every now and then I glance back. The canyon seems thinner from this side, but I know it's always there, twisting, watching, patient. The dunes stretched ahead, endless and pale beneath the fading light. Wind scuttled across the sand, carrying a dry, almost metallic taste. I could hear it brushing against my skin, a soft, cold scrape that made me shiver. Figures stood at the peaks, tall, still, waiting. Their skin caught the last of the sun, reflecting it like molten silver, unearthly and calm. I froze. My breath stalled. The quiet around them wasn't natural. Not a bird, not a rustle of leaves. Nothing but sand shifting under the wind. They didn't blink. They didn't move. And yet, I felt it, the space between us shrinking just slightly closer, without sound. I wanted to turn, to run, but the dunes seemed to stretch infinitely behind me, swallowing any path away. The shadows they cast leaned toward me, long and thin, bending unnaturally over the ridges. I caught my reflection in the wet streaks of sand, my own skin dim and human against their polished pale. A shiver ran through me. My ears rang with a hum that wasn't there, or maybe it was too low to define. A footstep, or was it the sand sighing under my weight? I couldn't tell. Every instinct screamed at me to move, but the quiet held me. It held me still. I tried counting the figures. 3, 4, maybe 5. One seemed closer than before, though the distance hadn't changed. I blinked. It shifted. Not its body, not its stance, the air around it. The space bent. My chest tightened. I could feel the static in the air, prickling along my arms, along the back of my neck. It smelled faintly of iron, like rust left in the sun too long. I imagined it moving through my veins. I whispered to myself, though no sound left my lips. They can't see me. They can't see me. And yet, in the corner of my vision, a shimmer, a slight shimmer, slid across the sand toward me. A reflection, a shadow, a thought made flesh. The sky dimmed, pale orange fading into bruised violet. I could see the horizon trembling, like the heat of the day had warped the air, like the dunes themselves were breathing. I felt their gaze, heavy and relentless. It pressed against my back. It followed me in every twitch of the sand. A soft scrape, barely there, and one figure shifted, just a tilt of a head. And then still again, eternal. But I knew it had watched me, measured me, understood the distance between life and whatever they were. I tried to move. A step forward, slow, careful. The sand gave way with a whisper, a sigh almost like regret. Every step made the air heavier, charged with a weight I couldn't name. The dunes' peaks swallowed the sun. Pale light lingered on their skin like a secret. I wanted to call out, to shatter the quiet, but my voice was small, broken, trapped beneath the hum that hummed with them. It wasn't fear exactly, more like the ache of being seen by something that didn't breathe. I sank to the sand, pressed my hands against it, tasting its cold grit. They didn't advance. Not yet. They simply waited. Time bent, or maybe I did. Each heartbeat stretched, slow, unbearable. I felt the wind catch my hair, tugging, urging, but the eyes on the peaks held me, unyielding. And then, something soft, almost tender, a breath I didn't take, drifting across my cheek. The wind, or a presence leaning closer in the quiet, brushing against the edge of understanding. I stayed there, pressed against the sand, watching the sky darken, and the figures stayed. Still, pale, silent watchers. Shadows on the dunes. Waiting. Always waiting. The sun had long folded behind the horizon, leaving the desert in a muted gray haze. The sand beneath my boots shifted softly. Cool now, though the day's heat still lingered in the air. I walked slowly, the world around me empty, yet not silent. A town appeared. At first, I thought it a trick of the fading light. Houses lined the street like pale ghosts, their windows staring hollow and dark. No doors moved. No smoke rose. No wind stirred the sand between cracks. I stepped closer. The sand under my feet trembled, almost as if it were breathing. Every footfall felt heavy, like I was pressing against a thin, unseen layer of glass. The air smelled dry. Dust rose from the ground in faint spirals, carrying the faint, bitter tang of old decay. The first building collapsed without warning, wood splintered quietly, stone crumbling into itself. A low, hollow sigh seemed to echo from nowhere, brushing across my skin. I froze. Shadows moved between the walls. Not like people, not like animals. Just long, darting shapes slipping to the fractures, vanishing before I could focus. They didn't sound, yet I felt them cold against the back of my neck, brushing past my ankles. I wanted to call out. The sound never formed. It hung in my throat. The street stretched ahead, and I could see more buildings ready to fall. But they waited, patient, like the desert itself was watching. I stepped onto a cracked porch. The wood shifted under me with a faint groan. A window above my head broke, silently. Glass floated down like frozen tears. I could feel a hum in the air, soft, deep, vibrating through my chest. The town was unraveling. Each building I passed seemed to dissolve the moment I touched its shadow. Walls folded into themselves. Roofs sank slowly, leaving only sand, pale and endless. It smelled of old smoke and wet sand after rain. Strange, impossible for a place so dry. A shadow flickered across the street. It paused, long and thin, just at the edge of a collapsing wall. I held my breath. Even my skin prickled, the hair along my arm standing. It didn't move forward. It didn't vanish. It simply waited, suspended in the fading light. The silence pressed down. I realized I wasn't breathing, though I could hear a faint rasp, like the wind brushing across forgotten rooftops. Every step left a faint imprint in the sand, but they disappeared almost immediately, smoothed over by something unseen. A doorway leaned open, dark inside. I peered in, expecting emptiness. Instead, the walls pulsed slightly, shifting as if the air itself had weight. I felt the shadow again, closer now, but still beyond reach. I wanted to step back. My feet felt stuck. The street ahead tilted, the buildings folding inward. A small house shivered and fell in slow motion, its bones of wood and brick collapsing into sand that smelled faintly of iron. I could hear faint footsteps behind me, soft, unsteady. But when I turned, the street remained empty. Only shadows lingered, slipping like smoke between the ruins. I walked on, the town dissolving around me. A mirage, I thought, a trick of heat and tired eyes. But the sand shifted with deliberate softness, and the shadows lingered longer than light should allow. A window hung loose above me, swaying just enough to catch the pale moonlight. The walls whispered as they fell, brushing past each other in the silence. I pressed my hands to my ears, though there was nothing to block. Even the wind seemed hesitant here. I reached the edge of the town. Buildings no longer stood. Only barren sand stretched to the horizon, yet the shadows remained fleeting, darting along dunes. Just at the corner of vision, cold air brushed my face. A low hum rose from the sand itself, faint, almost tender, almost like it wanted me to stay. I turned to look back. Nothing. The town was gone. Empty sand, pale and infinite, but the shadows lingered, always just beyond reach. I took a slow step forward. The desert swallowed my footprints as I moved. The hum faded, leaving only the soft rustle of sand against sand. And somewhere, beneath the stillness, I felt it watching, patient, waiting, never gone. The sky had a hollow gray, like ash scattered over the town. It was just after dusk. A chill pressed against my skin, carried on a wind that didn't reach the trees. I first saw it as a pale shimmer above the streetlights. A shape, enormous, unmoving. It hovered. The edges were soft, like they might dissolve if I blinked. Patterns of light, pale, almost liquid, slipped across its surface, reflecting on the damp pavement. I felt my chest tighten, an odd weight pressing from inside. The hum came next, not loud, but deep, filling the air, vibrating through my bones. It made the hairs on my arms stand tall. Every breath tasted metallic, electric. People were moving below it. Figures, but not quite human, their steps deliberate, quiet against the wet asphalt. I couldn't make out faces, only gestures, slow, precise, almost ritualistic. I wanted to turn away, but the light caught my eyes, held me. A soft rustle brushed past my ear, though no wind had moved. The hum pulsed. The air felt thicker, heavier, like it was leaning closer. I crouched behind a car, the cold seeping through my coat. Shadows stretched across the street, long and uncertain. The figures below the craft paused. Then one raised an arm, and the others followed. A single, deliberate motion that made my stomach lurch. I tried to breathe normally, but the hum was inside me now. I pressed my palms to my ears, though it did nothing. The streetlights flickered, but the hovering shape didn't. It simply stayed, immense and silent, like it had always belonged to the night. I noticed a shimmer on the edges of the craft, tiny sparks like frost-catching light. I wanted to look away. I couldn't. The figures began moving again, forming a circle beneath it. Their steps made no sound on the wet ground, but each movement felt deliberate, as if they were shaping the air itself. I felt my skin crawl, goosebumps running down my neck in cold waves. Above me, the light shifted. It poured pale patterns across the street. I saw shapes within it, strange geometries, impossible angles. The hum changed slightly, a low pulse now like it was breathing, or listening. I wanted to speak, to call someone, anything, but my voice stuck in my throat, swallowed by the hum. Even the wind was gone. Only the hovering shape and the figures below it remained. A droplet of rain fell onto my hand. Cold, quick, but it did not break the tension. The figures moved closer together, a silent congregation. I could sense more than see that they were aware of me. A shiver ran down my spine. Time lost meaning. Seconds stretched and bent. The hum fluctuated, a soft thrum now, almost comforting, almost inviting. I wondered, quietly, if I could ever leave without them noticing. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the light shifted again. The patterns dissipated, pooling into shadows that seemed to breathe. The figures froze. The hum faded into a soft, vibrating silence. I blinked. The shape above me remained, enormous and still, and then, without warning, it rose. Slowly, gracefully, lifting into the gray sky above. The figures scattered like smoke, leaving only the damp pavement behind. The hum lingered a moment longer, thin and fading like a sigh. I stayed crouched, trembling, tasting rain and electricity on my tongue. When I finally moved, my legs were stiff, reluctant. The street was empty, save for the shadows a hovering shape had left behind. I will never forget how it looked, or how it felt, heavy in the chest, alive in the air. Alone, I walked home. The fog clung to my skin, soft and pale, whispering its own quiet warning. The night held its breath, and I listened. The fog clung low to the ground, curling around the edges of the trees. Night had softened the air into something thick, almost liquid, heavy with the smell of wet earth. I walked where the moon barely touched, my boots pressing into mud that seemed to sigh beneath me. Then it appeared, a road, pale and faint, glowing just enough to cut a thin line through the dark. It shouldn't have been there. I knew the woods well. I had walked every hidden path, every broken trail. But this was new. I stepped closer. The light warmed my skin in a way that felt almost alive, pulsing faintly under my fingertips. The air trembled, though I heard no wind. Something shifted in the shadows behind the trees. Footsteps. They were soft at first, like dry leaves brushing against each other. I froze. They stopped, then appeared again, around me, circling, hiding just beyond the glow. I turned slowly. Nothing, just the trees, tall and silent. The road hummed beneath my feet, or perhaps the hum was inside my own chest. I followed it, drawn by curiosity I didn't trust. With each step, I felt eyes, countless and unblinking, tracing me. The forest seemed to lean closer, inhaling. I noticed the footprints then. Small, uneven, not like mine. They threaded alongside the road, moving in every direction, yet always circling back. I knelt, my fingers brushing the damp earth. They vanished beneath my touch. A swirl of dust or smoke rising without a wind. I stood, breath shallow, hands trembling slightly in the cold. The light of the road pulsed brighter, flickering like a candle caught in a draft. I wanted to turn back, but the path, it seemed to ask me to keep walking. Every step made the forest quieter. Even the usual rustle of night creatures had stopped. Silence had weight. Shadows stretched across the trees, long and thin, swaying though the air held still. I caught movement at the corner of my vision, shapes that should not move without wind. A feeling settled in my chest, soft, persistent, like someone had pressed a hand there, lightly, almost kindly. And still, the road glimmered, faint, inviting. I walked faster, then slower, unsure which felt safer. The footprints followed, vanishing whenever I approached, reappearing just beyond my reach. They were curious. Curious, like I was a puzzle to solve. I felt them whisper, without words. Not cruel, not threatening, but present. The air grew cooler, carrying the tang of damp stone and something older, metallic, beneath the soil. Every inhale tasted faintly of rust and smoke. I ran my palm along the edge of the glowing path. It hummed against my skin, a vibration that resonated in my bones. A pulse, alive, watching. I stopped. The road ended where none should, fading into mist, thin as breath. I glanced behind. No footprints, no trees moving, just the quiet, heavy and expectant. I knelt and pressed my hands to the earth. Cold, wet, real, but the air around me, it carried a weight of memory, or maybe promise. I felt drawn, as if stepping back would erase something I hadn't yet seen. I rose. One last look. The road flickered. A soft glow against the dark, a secret stretched across the forest floor. The footsteps lingered in my ears, echoing softly, almost playful, though the source remained unseen. I walked home. The fog thickened, wrapping around me like a shawl, and in the quiet of my own room later, I could still feel the road beneath my feet. Not in my eyes, but in my chest, a faint hum, reminding me I had been watched, not by one, but by all around, patient, curious, waiting for the next step. The road may be gone, but it waits. The wind whispered across the dunes. The sand shifted beneath my boots, soft, almost alive. Pale light from the low sun stretched long shadows, bending across the ripples. I paused. The dunes weren't normal. They rippled differently, as though something beneath the sand moved with intention. Shapes rose and fell with each step, vague, fleeting. Figures that could have been men, or maybe just sand playing tricks. I blinked. They were closer than I thought. A rustling circled me. Not wind, not animal. Something deliberate. My shadow stretched long, trembling across the dunes. It wasn't my shadow. Not entirely. The air smelled dry, sharp, like something burning far away. Each breath tasted like metal. I wanted to turn, but the horizon seemed wrong. A ripple there, moving independently of the wind. I whispered my own name. No answer, only a soft hum, constant beneath the sand. I tried to step forward, but the dunes resisted, folding in ways they shouldn't. I saw it then, or thought I did, a figure, pale, blurred, just beyond the crest. Every time I blinked, it moved, circling, always keeping its distance. The sand under my feet shifted faster now. Curves forming arms, legs, faces, but wrong. Faces that weren't faces, but somehow watching. I want to call out, but my voice was swallowed. The sky dimmed. Shadows pulled unnaturally around me. I crouched, hoping to hide, but the dune shapes leaned toward me. Soft footsteps, or the sand itself moving? I couldn't tell. A faint wind brushed my neck. I felt eyes there, though no one was near. My chest tightened. The hum grew louder, vibrating through the soles of my boots. I wanted to run. The dunes shifted, closing paths I had just walked. I dropped the sand. It clung, clotted around my hands, heavy, wet with something I didn't want to name. The shapes rose higher, towers of sand twisting into forms that felt aware. I touched one. It pulsed. I jerked back. The presence was everywhere now, circling, shifting, not visible, but always around. My shadow leapt in ways it shouldn't. I froze. My mind screamed at me to move, but my body obeyed some other rule. The sun sank lower, colors warped, bleeding across the dunes. I could see them more clearly now. Figures, tall, thin, faceless, emerging from the sand, only for a second, then gone, leaving ripples behind, as if they had never been. I crouched, buried my face in my hands. Soft sand trickled over my fingers. The wind, the hum, the shifting shapes, all pressing closer. I felt a weight on my chest, invisible, heavy. A faint whisper brushed my ear. I didn't understand the words. It didn't matter. The meaning was clear. Step, breathe, move, do nothing. I rose slowly. The figures or illusions, or whatever they were, receded into the dunes. The wind carried their shapes away, leaving only ripples that looked like footprints. Not mine, not anything I had seen before. The sky darkened further. Shadows pooled, finally still. I didn't move. I couldn't. And yet, I knew I wasn't alone. The dunes whispered, and they were waiting. The sand shifted beneath my boots. Each step stretched into a faint echo, lingering longer than it should. I paused. It was as if the wind itself was whispering after me, repeating what I had just thought. Pale light hovered along the horizon. I tried to focus, but it wavered, dissolving with my eyes fixed on it. A thin mist curled around my ankles, cold and damp. I shivered, pulling my coat tighter. Whispers crawled through the silence. I couldn't tell if they were behind me or inside my own head. The sound of my breath seemed to answer them. I stopped listening, but the sand only sighed under my weight. Each shadow stretched longer than it should. Shapes that weren't there a moment ago flickered at the edge of my vision. They vanished if I dared to look directly. And still, the faint murmurs followed. I stumbled over a ridge of sand, the echo bouncing twice this time. It sounded like someone was mimicking me, not perfectly, just enough to make me doubt myself. A breeze stirred, carrying a tang of something burnt, metallic. I blinked, and the horizon glimmered with those pale lights again. Closer now, I thought, but when I looked, they had retreated. The faint hum of whispers blended with the pulse of my heart. I crouched, letting my fingers drag through the cool sand. It was soft, slipping through my hands like smoke. I felt exposed. Every sound multiplied. Footfalls, distant shifting, the quiet sigh of the mist. The horizon pulsed with light again. I wanted to run, but every movement made the whispers faster, overlapping with themselves. It was as if the sand itself remembered my every step. I could see shapes in the pale glow now, tall and thin, standing just beyond the reach of vision, not moving, but shifting when I blinked. A sense of being watched curled through my chest. I tried calling out, but my voice seemed swallowed by the fog. Instead, a soft repetition came back to me, my own words drawn thin and distorted. It was only the wind, I told myself, only the sand. The pale lights hovered lower. A faint rustle of something brushing the dunes reached my ears. I froze. The whispers were louder now, layered, urgent. A step, then another, closer, though the sand showed no prints but mine. I dared not move. I only breathed, feeling the fog settle on my skin. Time felt wrong. Minutes stretched into endless echoes. Every faint whisper pressed against my mind. I tried to focus on the horizon, but the lights slipped away each time. Finally, the whispers thinned, retreating like the tide. The shapes dissolved into the pale mist. I sank to the sand, alone and trembling. The faint glow lingered at the horizon, distant and unreachable. I listened. Only my breath remained, only the soft sigh of sand beneath my hands, and a quiet, persistent echo like the world itself was remembering me twice. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the windows of my small house streaked and blurred. The world outside was a painting in grays and deep blues. The only light in the living room came from a single lamp in the corner, casting long, dancing shadows every time the furnace kicked on. I was reading or trying to. The words on the page had started to swim together. My neck was stiff. My eyes were tired. That's when I saw it. Through the watermarked glass of the front window, a shape in the yard. At first, I thought it was the old oak tree, its branches twisting in the wind. But trees don't move with that kind of purpose. This was a vertical line, a stark contrast to the fuzzy dark of the night. I sat up straighter, the book resting forgotten on my knees. My breath hitched, just a little. The figure was standing at the edge of the lawn, where the light from my window faded into nothing. It was perfectly still, and it was looking at the house, looking at me. I couldn't make out any features from this distance, just a silhouette, tall, unnaturally thin, a post stuck in the earth. A minute passed, then another. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen, and the thump of my own heart in my ears. I told myself it was a trick of the light, a shadow, a prank. But the longer I stared, the less any of those things felt true, because it began to move. It didn't walk. It glided. Its feet, if it had feet, seeming to never quite touch the wet grass. There was no rustle, no squelch of mud, just a smooth, silent approach, closing the distance between the tree line and my home with a dreadful, patient grace. My muscles locked. A coldness seeped into my bones. It stopped just outside the window, so close that only the thin pane of glass separated us. And I saw its skin. It was pale, so pale it seemed to drink the weak lamplight from a room. Smooth, like polished stone or poured wax. Without a pore, without a line. It reflected my own living room back at me, a distorted, warped version of my safe space, and my own terrified face, a face I barely recognized. It had no eyes that I could see, no nose, no mouth, just that blank, reflective surface. Yet I felt its awareness, a pressure against my mind, a focused, immense attention. It was studying me, not with curiosity, but with a kind of ancient recognition. The air in the room grew thick, heavy, like swimming through honey. It became difficult to breathe. Each inhale was an effort, each exhale, a shallow puff of mist in the suddenly cold air. A silent question hung between us, a terrible anticipation. What did it want? Why was it here? For me, the thought should have set me scrambling for the phone, for a weapon, for anything. But I was pinned, frozen in that chair, by a feeling that was not entirely fear. There was a wonder there, too, a dreadful, awe-filled wonder, to be in the presence of something so utterly other, something that defied every law I understood. The pale head tilted, just a fraction, a slight, inhuman adjustment, and in that movement I felt a universe of intent, a meaning I couldn't grasp, but understood in my soul. Then it began to raise one of its long, slender limbs, a hand with too many fingers, or perhaps none at all. The air hummed, a low, subaudible vibration that I felt in my teeth. The lamp on the corner flickered. Once, twice. The shadows leapt and danced like frantic things. This was it, the escalation, the moment the silence would break. I closed my eyes. I couldn't watch. I waited for the glass to shatter, for the door to splinter, for a touch colder than ice. But nothing happened. The humming stopped. The heavy pressure in the air vanished. I dared open my eyes. The room was bright. The lamp was steady. The furnace hummed its normal, comforting tune. I looked at the window. It was just a window again, showing nothing but my own reflection, and the dark, empty yard beyond. I sat there for a long time, the chill deep inside me, listening to the absolute silence, a silence that now felt different, not empty, but full, and waiting. The sun was a pale white coin in a bleached sky. I stood in the desert. The air was hot and dry, tasting of dust and ancient stone. It was completely silent. No wind, no buzz of insects, just the weight of the stillness, pressing against my eardrums. I looked out toward the horizon, a sharp line where the beige sand met the washed-out blue. I blinked. and the line smudged. It was like wet paint bleeding into the sky. The horizon dissolved into a blur, a shimmering, wavering wall of nothing. The desert in front of me didn't end anymore. It just continued, stretching out into an infinite, featureless expanse. My breath hitched. This was wrong. All the rules of the world felt broken. I took a step forward. The sand crunched under my boot, the sound unnaturally loud. A flicker of movement, far out in the blur. A figure, tall and thin, a dark stitch against the endless beige. It was just standing there, facing me, my heart hammered against my ribs. I didn't dare to blink. I kept my eyes wide, straining to see. The figure was there, a stark black silhouette. Then my eyes, dry from the heat, watered. I had to blink. The moisture felt cold on my hot skin. I opened my eyes. The figure was gone. There was only the blur, the endless stretch of sand. A cold dread began to pool in my stomach. I took another step. Another crunch of sand. Another flicker. This time, to my left, another dark shape. This one seemed closer. Its form was indistinct, like a shadow you see from the corner of your eye. I turned my head slowly, afraid of what I would see. It was there, motionless. I could feel its presence, a cold spot in the overwhelming heat. I stared, unblinking, for what felt like an hour. My eyes burned. The figure didn't move. It was a statue, a marker, a warning. A grain of sand found its way into my eye. The pain was sharp, immediate. I squeezed my eyes shut for just a second. A single, painful tear traced a line through the dust on my cheek. I looked again. It was gone. The silence was now absolute. It had a texture, thick and heavy, like was stuffed in my ears. I could hear the blood pulsing in my head, a soft, rhythmic whoosh. I tried to swallow, but my throat was too dry. I started to walk. My footsteps were the only sound in the universe. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Another flicker, this time directly ahead. And another off to the right. They were appearing more often now. Dark, solitary shapes in the blur. They would stand for a moment, silent sentinels in the wasteland. Then, if I so much as let my eyelids flutter, they would vanish, dissolving back into the heat haze. Were they getting closer? The next one felt nearer. I could almost make out its shape. Not a man, just the darkness, tall and thin. A human-shaped void. I stopped walking. What was the point? There was no direction, no horizon, just a blur, and them. I stood completely still. The silence pressed in. It was so complete. I could hear the faint, high-pitched ring of absolute quiet. I held my breath, listened, nothing. Then a new sensation, a soft, dry rustling, not from around me, from inside me, the sound of sand shifting in my own lungs. I looked down at my hands. The skin was pale, coated in a fine layer of dust. I looked up again. A figure stood 20 yards away. It didn't flicker. It was solid, real. It was just a silhouette, but I knew it was looking at me. We stood like that, 2 points in an infinite nowhere. The line between the ground and the sky was completely gone now. Everything was a single, blurred color, a pale, sickly beige. The figure lifted an arm, a slow, deliberate movement. It didn't point at me. It pointed past me, into the nothing. I didn't turn. I just watched, and then, without a sound, it dissolved. Not like the others. It didn't vanish in a blink. It simply unwound, stretching out like smoke, thinning, until it was just more of the blur. I was alone again. The silence returned, deeper than before. I lowered my gaze to the sand at my feet. I took one more step. My boot sank into the dust. I didn't look up again. There was nothing left to see. The air was still warm, long after the sun had gone. A dry, dusty heat that clung to the skin. I stood at the edge of the porch, the wooden planks rough under my bare feet. The desert at night was a different kind of quiet. Not an empty quiet, a waiting quiet. The sky was a vast black sheet, pierced by a billion cold, sharp stars. And below it, the dunes, rolling hills of pale sand, like the bones of the earth. That's when I saw it. A single light, hovering just above the highest dune. It wasn't a star. It was too close, too soft. A fuzzy, golden orb, drifting without any hurry. It moved like a breath, a slow, deep breath from the land itself. I felt my own breath catch in my throat. I'd lived out here for years. I thought I knew the silence. I thought I knew the emptiness. But I was wrong. The light pulsed just once, a gentle, almost comforting glow. And in that moment, I felt a shift, a deep, fundamental understanding that settled in my bones. This desert was not empty. It had never been empty. It was alive, and it was aware. It had been watching me all this time, watching me build my little house, watching me fetch my water, watching me think I was alone. The thought should have been terrifying, but it wasn't. It was just a fact, as simple as the sand beneath my feet. I looked away from the light, down to the base of the dunes. The shadows there were wrong. They didn't lie flat and still. They bent. They twisted upwards, like smoke rising from cold ground. They folded into shapes that made my eyes ache. Spirals that had no beginning. Angles that shouldn't exist. They were letters from an alphabet I could never read. A language written in negative space. I tried to follow the line of one shadow. It unspooled from a rock and then turned in on itself. It was a word I couldn't pronounce. A thought I couldn't think. My mind slid right off it. This was the desert's true face. Not the harsh, sun-baked stone, but this silent, shifting geometry in the dark. And then the wind began to a soft, sighing breath that swept across the sand. It didn't feel like a random gust. IT felt intentional. IT wrapped around me. Cool and DR IT rustled the fabric of my shirt. And in that rustle, I heard it, a whisper woven into the air. Not in my ears, but in my mind. A single, clear word. Goodbye. A wave of pure loneliness washed over me. So profound it felt like a physical weight. But the feeling passed as quickly as it came. I looked at the hovering light. I looked at the bending shadows. And I understood. The goodbye wasn't for me. I was just a bystander. The desert was talking to the night, acknowledging its departure, telling the darkness it was time to leave. The whisper was an intimate thing, a secret between old lovers. And I had overheard. The light began to fade, not to dim, but to pull inward. The soft gold gathered into a tiny, brilliant pinprick. And then it was gone, swallowed by the immense, star-dusted black. The unnatural shadows relaxed. They settled back into ordinary, flat darkness. The wind died completely. The silence returned. But it was a different silence now. A full silence. A knowing silence. I stood there for a long time, feeling the cool planks under my feet, smelling the dry, clean air, watching the place where the light had been. There was no fear left in me, only a quiet acceptance, a recognition of my own smallness. I was a guest here, a temporary visitor in a place that was ancient and awake, and so much more than it seemed. The last light was gone, but the desert was still here, waiting, and for the first time, I knew I was truly seeing it. I turned and went inside. The night was over, but the presence remained. A soft, patient hum at the edge of my hearing. A hum that would always be there.